In this video we focus on the major enhancement in EE12 over previous versions. That is the EP9A3 module, which was developed from the latest CLSI EP9 document. CLSI EP9 describes standard procedures for method comparison evaluations. The EP9A3 module is based on the third edition of this document. The module can be used to test new lab instruments against existing trusted instruments, or to evaluate the performance of new instrument designs as part of the manufacturer's evaluation and validation processes. The major front-end difference between the existing EP9 module and the EP9A3 module are that EP9 could handle 2 replicate pair tests for each specimen, while EP9A3 now allows up to 5 tests on each instrument for each specimen. This increases the mean precision levels of test evaluation and reduces the effects of random bias errors. It also allows the user to identify outliers more easily and to exclude any data that may be problematic where appropriate. This granularity helps produce a high-quality dataset and basic experiment ready for advanced statistical analysis, which will be described in the second section of this video. As usual, we're going to start on the statistical module screen, which is the main landing page in EE12. Most of the controls here and the page organization of EE Release 12 and the new EP9A3 module work on the same basis as before. But if you're familiar with EE, then you will notice an upgrade here. There are new quick access user buttons on the right of the screen that provide direct links to some of the most important applications in EE, such as the file manager, as well as to online resources such as the reference interval tables on the Data Innovations website. The Quick Help button here provides a link to the upgraded Help User Guide interface, which now includes instructions for using all statistical modules, including the EP9A3 module. You can find EP9A3 in the Statistical Modules book, which is marked with a Statistics Sigma icon. EP9A3 is directly below the existing EP9 module. The full contents of the EE User Guide have now been migrated into this Help User Guide file, and each module now has an experiment design page, including information about how to prepare experiments, as well as about the operation of the EE interface. But now we're going to move forwards and look at the front end of the new module, and how to open an experiment and enter a dataset. If you don't have data ready, you can open the sample project supplied with EE by going to the File menu, clicking Open Project and selecting Sample Data. This pulls data into EE, including the EP9A3. We can see the data once we open the module. EP9A3 is a method comparison experiment, so it's listed under that group of modules on the statistical module screen. This opens the experiment overview screen for EP9A3, which shows the different experiments and instruments set up for this module. Here's the group of sample experiments you would have added, but I'm going to open a different method comparison of a new candidate 2 instrument against an existing trusted reference instrument. The analyte used is potassium K. Double click it to open the experiment details screen, and we can see here a dataset table including 20 specimens. Each specimen has results for the maximum 5 replicate pairs. Specimen pairs data can be edited here in the new specimen edit forms. We can exclude individual replicate pairs if required. For example, if we look at the scatter plot for the data, we can see overall it looks pretty good, close to the 1-to-1 diagonal plot line we would expect for 2 instruments producing very similar results. But we can see that 1 or 2 specimens at least are clearly outlying. So we carry out a preliminary dataset cleanup before going further into statistical analysis. Click on the outlier to pull up its specimen edit form. If we examine the data here, there's one Y result that's clearly anomalous, 4.7, whereas the rest are all close to 3.7. This is perhaps due to contamination or data entry error. So we can check the box to exclude that pair from the calculation. If we now look at the scatter plot, we can see the mean data for that specimen is now a much closer fit to the one-to-one line. We can also look at the new specimen pairs plot, where we can see the points showing every individual replicate pair, with the excluded outlier pair now well above, shown in grey as it's been manually excluded. We can also see the close grouping of the rest of the replicate pairs for that specimen below. So clearly the outlier was anomalous and should have been excluded. If we now include that pair again, we can see the dataset fails the basic tests for constant SD and CV automatically. And we can also choose to exclude the outliers automatically if we check the box. And we can see now both outliers are excluded, so we get a really good data set left behind, and both outlier pairs appear separately on the specimen pair plot, although excluded, which is shown by the squares. And those squares also appear on the data entry table beside the excluded replicate pairs. We could also choose to exclude the whole specimen here. So now all of the specimen points appear in grey on that specimen pairs plot. But the best policy here is to re-include the specimen and exclude the individual replicate pairs automatically. So now we have a good data set, we can move on to the core of the module, which is the processing, analysis, display and statistics generation for the experiment. We can see on the right of the screen that EE has already given us some information and warning messages based on its automated preliminary data evaluation. There is no failure for constant SD or CV, but we are warned that we don't have enough specimens to pass the selected analytical mode, which is MER. This is manufacturer's established relationship for method development. And this mode has the most stringent requirement of 100 specimens to pass, so our reports will be marked preliminary with this 20 specimen dataset. Now we're going to set up the detailed parameters for analysis and statistics output using the usual F7 or parameters button on the bottom left of the screen to open the interface. We can see the analytical AM mode is set here to MER. We're going to leave that for now. A bias claim limit can be plotted around the regression line once entered and selected for plots. We can also choose more sophisticated regression types here, though EE may warn us that some types are not appropriate given the characteristics of the dataset. The outlier exclusion level can also be set here to either 1% or 5%. In our case, this matches the bias claim, so we will see this 1% line on scatter plots. We can also select to show histograms of bias distribution on the bias plots. But the most important new setting here is the maximum number of results for the X method or instrument and for the Y method or instrument. If the data set is in replicate pairs, then these will both be set equal to the number of pairs. But if the data set is not in replicate pairs, then an uneven data shape can be selected. This means that individual results are entered separately rather than in pairs, and so individual results can be selected and excluded individually. There will be no specimen pairs scatter plot at all in this case. Only the means or medians for each X specimen and Y specimen are used in the main scatter plot, 1 point for each specimen. But the bias plots are produced, And we can see the percent bias claim here of plus or minus 1% shown by the red bound lines. Histograms are on the right, showing the spread of biases around the mean. And so now we can move to the last tab, which shows the statistics produced by the experiment. This takes us towards the back end of the module where the metrics that are to be reported can be reviewed. So here are the results for the experiment after the anomalous outliers have been removed. We can see the statistics are divided into 4 sections: regression results at the top, then medical decision point estimates if defined, then result distribution if bins were defined, and finally other important statistics. There can be up to 3 different regression types reported along the top of the screen depending on what was set up in parameters. The basic ordinary least squares regression, OLS, is the most familiar slope type and is included by default. But it is susceptible to influences due to imbalanced data sets and other factors. And so the EP9A3 standard and this module provide more advanced regression algorithms. These can be used to provide more realistic slope estimates. Weighted regressions can be used, as well as Deming and passing Bablock types. There are sophisticated jackknife and bootstrap algorithms used to calculate the 95% confidence intervals for the slopes and biases, including at any medical decision points defined. The full logic behind the best choice of regression algorithm is discussed in the Help User Guide for the EP9A3 module in the Regression and MDP Bias Flowcharts page. Users should also read the EP9 3rd edition standard itself to understand the logic behind the choices. In other statistics, there is the analysis mode AM listed, which the experiment has failed based on having too few results. And then we have other statistics like the results ranges listed, along with X ratios. This is the largest result divided by the smallest for each instrument, rounded to a whole number. This X ratio is significant when choosing best regression types, as some work better with high X values. Any results that fail the statistical tests will show up in red. In this case, our refined data set with no outliers has passed on slope and intercept, if not on numbers of results. But if we have enough results, we can move forwards to see the output from the experiment, which is particularly important as the final reports are prepared and formatted for presentation to external reviewers such as CAP inspectors. So now click Print Preview to look at the final report. Choose what is to go in the reports, include experiment results data as well as plots and statistics if necessary. Here are the plots from the experiment, and the vital statistics are correctly formatted. Some choices can be made about formats in the Preferences menu. Outliers are shown in the dataset, but not on the plots themselves. Finally, there is an RIG Report Interpretation Guide document that can be appended which summarizes information about the math, logic, algorithms and statistical methods that are used by the EP9A3 module. So thanks for taking the time to watch this video. If you have any feedback or suggestions for future development, you can contact us at the datainnovations.com website. Also note that the Help User Guide is now online at help.epevaluator.com.